I want to introduce to you tonight to Jeff Shaw. He's from the Zen tradition and the Rinzai tradition of Zen, and he'll be talking tonight about growing old in Zen. So a big welcome to you, Jeff, here at the Buddhist Society. Thank you so much for coming all this way.
It's an honor to be back here at the Buddhist Society in London. As mentioned, the theme this evening is growing old in parentheses. Growing in Zen or growing old in Zen. In a few weeks I will be 66 years old, so with some authority I guess I can speak about this. I'll just begin with a very simple but effective Zen statement from the Chinese Zen tradition. It's hard to translate, just a few characters, but something like, with each step the pure wind rises. With each step a refreshing breeze, the pure wind rises. In a sense, all that I want to say is contained in that phrase. But then again, growing old is not always such a refreshing breeze, is it? So I would like to really pin that down. What does it mean to grow and to grow old? In my 60s, the last 5-6 years, I can really feel a loss of control, vitality, energy. I'm very healthy, and yet the vitality and energy of my 30s and 40s is long gone. It's almost as if I can feel slowly sense experience is beginning to shut down. My eyes are not so good. My hearing is going. This is something that happens as we age. What is the real significance? Is this something to despair over and to try to get back to some youthful, forever young, as Bob Dylan would put it? What is it to really grow old? We're all familiar with this notion of no self, or being without self, a basic teaching of Buddhism. If we don't really have a self, well, what is all this growing old stuff? Let's take a look at that this evening together. What is being lost as we grow old? The sense experiences are, in a sense, shutting down. What is being lost? And what can't be lost? This is one way of pinpointing what I want to take up today. What am I? What are we? What is the self if it grows old and dies? What is it? What is its nature really? If it is born, lives for a while, grows old, and then dies. What is that? What is that? Do we really know immediately and directly? And if we do, would it be frightening? In Japan, as you know, Japanese worldwide tend to live a pretty long life. And I heard recently, it's kind of a joke that the Japanese tell, all of the older Japanese people, 70s and so on, they often will line up at a doctor's office, their local doctor's office, before it's even open. They get up early, they don't have much else to do. So they wait for the doctor's office to open. They talk a little bit. And then they go in, maybe they get an injection, or they do some physical therapy or some medicine or something. But pretty much every morning, and you can see them when I bicycle to work, I can see them at the doctor's offices waiting there. Well, there's a story that one morning, one of the older women didn't show up. And so they kind of, I wonder where she is. And they said, maybe she's sick. But I would suggest that nature, if I use that word broadly, nature knows what it's doing. We don't always know what we're doing, but nature knows what it's doing. At 60, in our 60s, I reckon we've seen what we need to see. So if our eyes start to go, well, if you haven't seen what you need to see at 60, something's wrong. If you haven't heard what you need to hear with the ears, something's wrong. We have experienced the world with our senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and of course the mind itself. We have experienced that. Could it be that we don't need to experience that anymore? We don't need to have the visual acuity of the 20 or 30-year-old. Could that be? You see, this is directly related to what I am. What I am. If we fixate on myself at 25 years old, it looks pretty bleak, doesn't it, when you get to be 50 or 60? But what really are we? What really is this identity that goes through time, gets old, and dies? What is that? What do we really need? Do we really need the sense impressions to continue on forever? Do we really need to still seek with our eyes and our ears for sounds and sights? When consciousness itself starts to go, what remains? What remains? What remains? If that's clear, death is not a problem. Death itself is calm. Realizing this, life is at peace. Death is at peace as well. I would say this is genuine contentment. This is what is called in Buddhism resolving the one great matter of life and death. But let's be a little more practical, Sitting here in this pretzel-looking position, sitting in Zen meditation, Zazen, for long periods of time, inquiring into this. Who is this? What is this? Really inquiring with all of our heart. What becomes clear? Well, let's just speak a moment about practical benefits. We're not doing it for that. But as a matter of fact, there are practical benefits. As you are able to enter samadhi, a kind of concentrated oneness, the senses are at rest. By sitting in samadhi, and of course it doesn't have to be limited to this posture, but by sitting and giving ourselves to sustained samadhi, this kind of concentrated oneness, things can become very, very clear. We can start to realize the peace even in the dissolution, the dissolving of what we identify with as ourselves. What I see, what I hear, what I remember. But there are also even more practical benefits. For example, pain. As we get old, pain can often be an almost constant companion. If you sit deeply in samadhi, in this concentrated oneness, there are many precise descriptions of what happens. For example, a feeling of joy wells up. A feeling of joy. It's a feeling of joy precisely because we are not clinging to some sense experience, at least for that moment. So it's not the joy of having had a good meal or some kind of a sense pleasure. It's precisely being loosed from the senses, at least for a while. And then this kind of joy wells up, not from sense experience, but you might say from the depths of your being. This is considered the first kind of proof that you are meditating properly. A sense of joy arises. But again, a joy not dependent on sense experience. Well, if you sit even more deeply, you can experience what it is to be without pleasure or pain. Without pleasure or pain. Well, this can be helpful when you go to the dentist. I don't have very good teeth. And it's fun going to the dentist because the dentist always wants to give me Novocaine. I say, that's okay. You know, if it hurts, I raise my left arm. You know, he's always looking in. Pain is not really a problem. Pain is not a problem. It's a sensation. It's the body telling us something is wrong. If we can really be with that pain, it's not that you don't feel anything, but you experience it simply as what it is, the sensation that it is. And you come to realize the real suffering, the real pain is not that, it's what the mind does with it, right? Maybe even before it comes, we're already worrying about it. Huh? And then when it comes, we're trying to get away from it, often physically actually making it worse as a result. Huh? So to be able to sit deeply enough so that you are free of creating anything with this sensation of either pleasure or pain is a very liberating experience. No, it is not the goal of Buddhism, but it's a nice perk. It's a nice perk on the way. As you experience this more deeply, you can see how, for example, being with someone who is dying, you can be with them fully. And they can see that being at rest, even in those last moments, yes, they can be that way. They can be that way. If you are truly at rest with death, they can feel that way too. Huh? You may not even need to speak. When my mother was dying, my twin sister was holding her hand, and she said at one point, she said, I didn't know whether I was comforting my mother or my mother was comforting me. And when we sit deeply in meditation, we experience what these sensations really are. It's a very different experience. And when we sit all the way through what we call ourselves, death itself is not a problem. And we can be with someone who is dying, and we can be with them. And just with the eyes, perhaps. And you don't have to say anything, but just being there with them, they can see. It's okay. It's okay. When the time is right, it's okay. Let go. It's okay. It's okay. This is a very helpful benefit for yourself going through it and then being of service to others. Huh? We don't really need anything. That's what you come to. If you really sit through in Zen meditation, you realize, I don't need a thing. I am not a thing. I don't need a thing. So to say, with each step, the pure breeze rises. Well, you turn that around and just say, with our last breath, with our last breath, the pure wind rises. To really sit through in sustained meditation like that, huh? Again, it's a pretty, I don't know what the mean average here on the age of the participants here, but yeah, we're a middle-age, at least, crew here. So I think we have a commonality there, huh? But I'm getting old. Again, in a few weeks I'll be 66. My ears aren't what they used to be. Neither are my eyes. My body sure isn't what it used to be. And neither is my mind. How do you enter the way of Buddhism? Or simply, how do you live truly, huh? When the senses themselves are failing? This is a crucial question, isn't it? This loss, as it appears, huh? This loss due to natural aging, huh? Can really frighten the self, especially if it identifies with itself at a certain time and place. Huh? Witness the pathetic attempts of people trying to deny their aging. Huh? Does nature really know, so to speak, what it's doing? It can seem like a very cruel trick. Huh? Why give us this life and then, in the end, slowly just take it away? Well, if we see it that way, it seems pretty tragic, doesn't it? But I would say, from my experience, when we are young, we are given great strength and stamina, strong memory and mind, because we need it then. Huh? And gradually these fade over time, these fade. Huh? But when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you have that stamina, the memory, the energy to do what needs to be done. And as you get older, well, other things perhaps need to be done. Not the physical stuff, huh? I would say gradually the senses fade. And this is also a precious gift that nature is offering us. The gentle glow you see of many people like in their 80s. Huh? Well, they don't have the energy of a 25-year-old. They're not going to work out at the gym. But they have a gentle glow that young people cannot have. And this is a beautiful thing. They forget sometimes. Maybe they need a cane going up or down the stairs. But there's something there that young people cannot have, cannot experience. Huh? This comes with age. Huh? I would say the way, the Buddha way, is perfectly manifest there as well. Not just in youth, in middle age, but in old age, in dying, in forgetting, in losing our minds. Oh, the way is perfectly manifest there as well. It's not some transcendent realm beyond the senses. Where would such a realm be? No, it's this very realm here. Seeing, hearing, remembering, forgetting, free of self-attachment. Free of self-attachment. Free of itself. Thus, even at 80, it can gently leap out of itself. Leap out of itself. Huh? Not being locked up inside of ourselves. Huh? We can relate to that whether we're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or 70. Yeah? Not to be locked up inside of ourselves, but to see the boundless beauty and dignity that is there, even on the deathbed. It's nonetheless there. To really see that and confirm that for yourself, I would urge you to consider. Aging, illness, death become what they really are. You know, these are birth, aging, illness, and death were considered to be what Gautama Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, had to resolve in this life. Well, but it doesn't mean he went to a transcendent realm. It means in birth, aging, illness, and death, he was free, totally free. In other words, he was free of himself. He was free to be whatever was at that time. Coincidentally, this is a large scroll of Gautama Buddha passing away. You see lying on his right side peacefully while all beings are mourning his passing. This is the death of Gautama Buddha. Actually, he was dying of food poisoning and was in intense pain if he was in an ordinary state of consciousness. It even says he had diarrhea. But he passed away peacefully, lying down on his side like that. Death itself is calm. Life itself, whatever the turbulence going on, it is calm. What is lacking? What is lacking? What is lacking? I don't have the ears I used to have. Low sounds, I can't hear them anymore in this ear. High sounds, I can't hear in this ear. So the doctor said, it's not really so bad, it kind of balances out. But yeah, I'm losing my hearing, yeah. And of course there's that sound, you know, tinnitus or something like that. The way I look at it is Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings. You know that piece? It's a wonderful piece, violins, and it's been used in a number of movies. The way I see it now is I have the climax of that piece permanently in my ears now. I kind of like it myself, but yeah, that's there, that's there. I don't hear like my hippie days. That sense is going. Yes, yes. What remains? What remains? To see that, to hear that, is the task of growing old, isn't it? With each step, the pure wind rises, even if it's your last step. The pure wind rises. It may still sound a bit abstract, and I know some of you are very experienced in the Buddhist and or Zen tradition, so let me give some illustrations. There's a famous koan that is considered a difficult koan. Koan is kind of a problem or a challenge to help us see ourselves. This is from a collection called the Gateless Barrier. And it's a master, his name in Japanese is pronounced Tokusan. Tokusan. It's very simple, the first part of the koan. Tokusan is now a very old master. And usually in the monastery, when a meal is going to be, when the meal is ready, they announce it with certain gongs and so forth. Well, one day, when the monk in charge of the food preparations, before he had sounded the gong, Master Tokusan, the old master, came with his bowls that you would eat with, his kind of begging bowls. He came with his bowls to the dining hall. And the monk said, "But Master, it is not yet time for the midday meal. The gong has not been rung yet." And so the eminent master turns around and walks back. This is the first part of the koan. It becomes a little complicated after that because that monk becomes perhaps a little bit proud that he had bested the master. He's getting a little senile maybe, huh? So there's a conversation between some of the other monks about what happened and whether Toksan is not yet fully there or not, huh? Whether the old master is losing it or not. Huh? It's, in a way, it's a very playful, perhaps the first koan on senility that there is in the Zen tradition, I'm not sure. But it's a very delicate koan. It's not as simple as it may appear on the surface. Huh? What is it for Toksan the master to make a mistake, to come at the wrong time? What is that? And when he hears that it's not time, what was it for him to simply turn around and walk back? It's a very delicate point, perhaps, in our own life. What happens when we make a mistake? Do we turn around and go right back? It's a very interesting koan. By the way, by way of background, Toksan, this is the guy, this is the Chinese, when he was a monk, that was a very, very proud guy. And he was so strong and uncompromising in his Zen that when anyone would approach, he would pick up the short stick that he carried and would say, 30 blows if you speak, 30 blows if you're silent. What do you do with that? Well, this is a real challenging koan. He wasn't beating around the bush. Again, often when a monk would approach that was not yet there, he would challenge, 30 blows of my stick if you speak, 30 blows if you're silent. To help them see where they are. But now this koan that I mentioned is that same master, quite old, completely different character now. He makes a mistake, is corrected, and he simply turns around and walks back out. This is the self-same master, Toksan. The koans themselves, you see, it's something you can realize the significance of. But at the same time, to realize the significance of that koan at 25 years old is different than to realize it at 50 years old or at 75 years old. I wouldn't say necessarily, although you may really have seen through it at 25, that answer will not do when you're 50. And it won't do when you're 75 either. In this sense, it really is a living spiritual tradition. It's not just some absurd question that you answer. It's something that we live through. Anyway, I won't go into this rather delicate koan anymore, but just leave it with you. Again, very simply. The old master Toksan is walking into the dining hall before it's time. And the monk says, "What are you doing, master? I have not rung the gong yet. It is not yet time." And the master simply turns around and walks back. This is a revered koan in the Zen tradition. Wow. What's the point? What's the point? I leave it with you for now. You're familiar with Confucius, the Analects? This is not Buddhism, but it is Chinese thought. And actually, Zen, it's well known that Zen is, in some ways, Chinese Buddhism that was deeply influenced by Taoism. Lao Tzu, Chuang Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, this kind of thought. However, Confucianism, what we think of as the more conservative element, is not absent in Zen Buddhism. There are a few koans that are actually taken from the Analects of Confucius. Well, this is not one of them, but I'd like to make it a koan. Very simply, from the Confucian Analects, to quote in my own translation. He's talking about growing up. At 15, I was set to learn. At 30, stood firm. At 40, doubt gone. At 50, providence known. Providence, the way of heaven. At 60, ear open, come what may. At 70, follow my heart's desire without going astray. If you read the commentators on the Analects, eventually in China it became a kind of a state religion, and Confucius was considered almost kind of like a god. So in other words, when he was a child even, he was already wise. So this statement doesn't really fit in with much of the traditional Chinese view of Confucius as almost a god. So one of the great commentators wrote the following. Commentators are perplexed with this chapter. I would say not as confused as Confucius. Commentators are, it doesn't fit in with a lot of the other analects of Confucius. But let us look at it from a Zen point of view. So I will make some brief comments on what Confucius has said here, from my experience. On the surface, it may sound like I'm making fun of him or criticizing him, but in Zen, this is a very common way of showing a deep, full appreciation of something and then going beyond it, as you must, you see? Not just sticking, oh, it's so wonderful. No, if it's that wonderful, go beyond it. So beware, I'm not just making fun of him, I'm bringing him home. So again, my own commentary on this statement. At 15, I was set to learn. My comment would be, at 15, that was the last thing on my mind. I was at Woodstock at 15. Set to learn. Well, at 30, stood firm. At 30, stood firm. My comment, on what? On what? At 40, doubt gone. My comment, I doubt that. At 50, providence known. The way of heaven is finally known. Huh? It's a bit controversial, but I'll say it anyway. He's got one foot in the grave and the other in stone, yet he's trying to tell us all is known. Do you understand? At 70, oh, sorry, I forgot 60. At 60, ear open, come what may. There's only one comment to that. What? He can't hear anyway. His mouth is open wider than his ears. Finally, at 70, follow my heart's desire without going astray. You see what great humility he had? Only at 70, which was rare to reach that age 2,500 years ago. But at 70, only then to follow my heart's desire without going from the norm, the principle, what was right, according to the Analects. Come what may. My response, where does that boastful statement come from? Huh? It sounds like maybe a senile old man mumbling in his sleep, doesn't it? But do you see what can be done by unpacking these statements in this way? Showing them, in a sense, from their backside? Again, I'm not making fun of Confucius. I'm maybe bringing him down to earth, where he would want to be, I think. How would you respond to those statements? Huh? It's, in a way, a wonderful, maybe a philosophy of life through the ages, once again, from the second chapter of Confucian Analects. At 15, I was set to learn. At 30, stood firm. At 40, doubt gone. At 50, providence known. At 60, ear open, come what may. At 70, follow my heart's desire without going astray. So I could go on for hours about growing old, but let me open it up and see if anyone has a question or a comment, and we can take it from there. That might be more helpful. What are your concerns? What are your questions? Please feel free to speak up for the benefit of all. Yes?
I was just thinking, well, Confucius is Confucius,
Yeah.
and I am me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't really question Confucius. If he felt like that,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I don't, you know, or maybe I do. You know, I feel like I'm following my heart more now I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
I was following something else when I was younger.
Yeah,
Many
so-
things, you know.
So was I. So was I. Yeah.
But I have been accused recently, over the years, of being a grumpy old man. You know, like maybe 2 days out of 4 or something, you know. So that concerns me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because the changing world around me I find very difficult. You know, I'm not happy about people walking around with mobile phones, crowded buses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I find that's what I find in old age.
Yeah.
Not so much myself. I kind of accept death. I'm afraid of maybe the pain of dying, but I can't see anything wrong with death itself because I don't know it anyway. You know, or I don't remember it. So I'm not going to be afraid of death because I don't know what it is. You know, I just know it's part of life, and I want to accept it. You know. But I suppose I'm worried, you know, I mean, about pain because I had a lot of pain last year, and I'm got better from it actually, you know, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I've got to keep my eye on it, arthritis and things, you know. But I'm doing very well for my age, you know. He was about 2 years older than me. I was born in 1951.
51.
You know, and it's good to see me still good, sit in the lotus, because I used to when I was 20.
It's about the only thing I can still do.
Yeah, I have to sit on the chair these days. But that's because I stopped for a long time, and I just couldn't get back to it.
Yeah.
But I did perfect it. I could sit comfortable for an hour, you know, in my 20s and 30s, you know. But then I stopped for about 10 years, and I just couldn't get back into it, you know. So, yeah, the only thing I'm worried about being old now at the moment, maybe pain coming, and being a grumpy old man, really. But I think that's the world around me today.
Yeah.
That's, sorry if I'm going.
No, it's okay. A grumpy old man.
I'm very happy you're here, and I'm here as well. So that's fantastic. Thanks. And the Buddhist site is here.
Yes.
And the Buddhist site has helped me accept things more than ever. It's changed my life since I've come to the Buddhist site. I was just smoking dope and doing nothing before I came to the Buddhist site.
Now you're just doing nothing, I guess.
I was fortunate enough to meet Princess Humphreys as well. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I wrote a memoir of him, you know, that was published. You know. But I don't want to go on about me, so if anybody else wants to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the pain, I mean, that's probably, you're not just speaking for yourself. Almost everyone, I mean, pain is one of the biggest problems. And in America, it's horrendous. You know, the abuse of drugs, opioids, and so on. It's not even older people; it's younger people. Maybe they have a sports injury or something like that, and then they start, and it just goes on and on and on. And again, you have some meditative experience, so you've probably touched it. What it is to be able to sit deeply enough, and you don't have to sit like this.
No,
you can
I
sit,
don't.
but to sit deeply enough so that you can, how to say it, experience the pain for what it is.
It's always
Just
something,
what it is.
what's great about being in touch with Buddhism or Zen or whatever you want to call it, is it's something that you can always come back to. You know, you might be grumpy for a couple of days, or in pain for a couple of days, but hopefully in old age, or it doesn't matter whether you're old or young, that, you know, you've got that to come back to. You know, I say that to people about meditation or something, you know, it's something that you can trust, that you can go back to. You know, you might go off the rails for a little while, but if you've got something, you know, if you sort of, you have some kind of peace from whatever, it could be from some other religion or whatever, if you have that kind of peace within yourself, and you can keep that with you, you know, even if you lose it for a couple of days, it's still there, that you can come back to, and hopefully on your day of dying, you can still connect with that. I think it's a nice way to go. Yeah.
Well, you might want to go back, it's okay, you might want to go back and look into the meditative experience. You know, there's a lot of work, not just in Zen, but in mindfulness training, where they're dealing, you know, that really started Jon Kabat-Zinn by treating people who were in hospice, who were dying, and they were in great pain, and rather than just stay drugged up all the time, trying to develop a way that they could meditate so that they could be clear and live out whatever time was left, rather than just be drugged up. That in itself is a very precious thing, to learn to experience the nature of pain. You know, like I did it sitting in meditation, sitting in full lotus, and the pain comes, and it just, you know, it can really be intense, but it goes away after a while. And then often it will come again, even more powerful. Oh my goodness, it's not asceticism, right? Buddhism is not asceticism. But if you make sure that you're sitting properly, make sure that you're sitting properly.
Yeah. It's okay.
And if you sit all the way through, at some point, the pain really does drop away. Again, I don't mean you never feel pain. That sensation is still there, but you have experienced it arising, and instead of reacting, you have experienced it all the way, lasting for a while, maybe becoming very intense, and then you have experienced it ceasing, because that's what it does, it doesn't go on. And once you know that, again, not in your head, but once your body knows that, it's a completely different experience of pain. It's your body telling you something is wrong. If you need to correct it, do it, otherwise, go on. But you're not enslaved by the pain. I think this is an enormous, you know, what you're talking about is a very big, important problem, maybe even more in my own home of the United States.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful, not like the pain is not getting in the way of yourself. Like, you know, I mean, I'm happy sitting on the chair now because I just can't, you know, it's too much pain. The pain gets in the way.
It's not torture. We're not trying to torture ourselves.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because when I was younger, I could sit for an hour, and if I had pain, it never really bothered me that much.
Let's see what the others have to say.
But,
okay?
Yeah, but the worst thing was later on, when the pain was getting in the way, and that pain went when I started sitting on a chair. Accepting my shoulder. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, please feel free to speak up. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to ask you something about the tradition in Japanese monasteries and people getting older who live in monasteries, because that must be a challenge, and it's not so much to get connected to the koan you use, but is there still a tradition of people living their life out in the monasteries, or even people going at an advanced age to live there? As in India, you have a lot of people on an advanced age just you know, getting out of society, leaving their families behind. Something that I guess we used to have in Christian the West for a long time, but that's long ago gone.
Yes, in the Rinzai Zen monasteries, it's a very strict lifestyle, 3 in the morning till 11 at night. If you're not, I went in when I was 28 and it was hell, but most of the Japanese monks go in around 22 years of age. They go to 4 years of college usually, and then they go in. So that's the average. So they're pretty much at their prime, but it's still very, very demanding, very, very difficult. And usually they stay for some years, and then it's a bit complicated, but for the past 100 or so years, the Japanese Rinzai priests have been able to marry, thus they can have children, thus the first son would take over the temple. So many of the monks that are training there now are training there because they are the first son of a temple priest, and part of it is career training. So they will do it a couple of years, get a sense, and then they will become the priest of their family temple. That's where they will live for the rest of their life. In the monastery is very, very strict, very, very severe. I know some monks who have spent 10, 15, maybe up to 20 years in the monastery, but that's about it. I know one Japanese guy who went in, I think he was 58, and he lasted. He made it for 2 years, but it was not easy. It was not easy. So it's a very, very strict, again, the monastic lifestyle in the training monastery. A temple is a different thing. It's very intense, but that's, there's a rationale there. They're being put in that. It's almost like a pressure cooker, hoping that they'll have some kind of an experience, and then they can go back and to their home temple, take over for their father, become a priest, perform funeral services and things like that. But hopefully continue to mature what they've experienced in the monastery. But it's not something like in the Catholic monasteries where you go in and you will live the rest of your life. If you become ill, maybe you would, go to another place to be cared for. But basically, you're a monastic for life. You're a nun for life. It's not that you cease being a monastic, but you become a temple priest usually. And then you're no longer training in the strict monastery. You're out in a temple. So it's not so strict. Okay, but it's very strict. Very strict. I could tell you some stories, but you can read that stuff elsewhere. And several people here have been to Japanese Rinzai monasteries. They can tell you some stories if you want. But I would say what we're trying to do here is to do the fundamental practice where we are. So if you can, by all means, I went into a monastery. It was precious. It was hell, but it was, it was precious. Really, really precious. So if you can, I would urge you to spend as much time as you can in a monastery. Go to China if you can find a real monastery that they're doing it in now. Go to Korea, see how they do it there. Go to Japan, see how they do it there. Each one is quite different. And then come back here and figure out how to do it here. That's what we really have to do. So that kind of intense practice is really valuable when you're desperate, especially when you're desperate. Otherwise, it's just crazy. But when you realize one great matter of life and death, this is what you must do in this life. A monastery is a greenhouse. It's a greenhouse. Okay. Yes, Alan.
On the subject of getting old, a question that's sometimes asked in classes is it too late? I'm so old now. Is it too late for me to start training? After all, as we've spoken, our strength is diminished, our senses are diminished. So is it too late for me to start?
It could be too late to train in a Rinzai Zen monastery, yes. I wouldn't recommend it after 40 unless you're in really good health. But that doesn't mean you can't practice. That doesn't mean you can't practice. On your deathbed, you can practice, lying down. So we have to be clear about what it is to go through a kind of sustained, really rigorous practice, which has its great benefit. But that doesn't produce awakening. It kind of is a great cultivation, but that doesn't create it. And you can be a paraplegic, and you can still do Zen practice. So the essential practice is inquiring into the nature of ourselves. And that has nothing to do with being behind monastery walls. But it sure can help, that kind of training. But it's not necessary, no. You can start at 80. There was an 80, by Chinese reckoning, 83, so probably 82-year-old Chinese monk about 700 years ago who went to one of the great Dinchi Rinzai masters. And he was able to get awakened just through an exchange with a teacher, Da Hui or Dae. That's exceptional, but yeah, that's possible. It's possible. It's always there. It's always there. So, okay, is that satisfactory?
Thank you.
Yes.
In an age where we don't have much disease, generally speaking in the West anyway, we've eradicated most of the infectious diseases.
Mm-hmm.
People have an extraordinary kind of life expectancy now, which is really new to the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems at the same time that people are absolutely obsessed with their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
At a time when people had a short life expectancy, the body was sort of seen in a much more relative way.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have long life expectancy. People are obsessed with their appearance, with their weight, with their fitness, with their this, with their that. In some ways, Western civilization has brought with it, this capacity to have a long life, disease-free, but the price for that is an obsession with our body, our physical appearance, and the materiality of the body itself, and an identification with it. What you're talking about is an antidote, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a serious problem. I think back not that long ago, in the last maybe 100 years, I knew many stories from friends and from relatives where their grandfather, their great-grandfather, when they got too old, they stayed at home, and they stopped eating, stopped drinking, and they had their family around them so they could see the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and be there with them. And then after some days, they just passed away at home. And it was quite a natural thing. It wasn't even really a very sad thing, because the person had lived a good long life, and he was with the family. He was where he wanted to be at the end. And then they passed away. Not just in Japan, but in America, the same kind of stories. This has been almost completely forgotten, getting old and then trying to find out what we can do to alleviate any kind of pain or any kind, and it seems to me to have become a disease of its own, almost. So it's a serious problem, and I'm not in the medical field. There are actually some medical doctors here who may have more insight. All I can say is, when my time comes, I'm ready. And I think you can say the same thing. Huh? So, why try to appear like when you were 25 or 50? For who? For whom? For yourself? For others? It's a strange thing to do. Why try to appear other than you are? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I see it every day and it hurts, but I really don't understand it. It's like, do you see who you are? If you do, how could you play that game? Spend so much time and money and effort trying to appear otherwise. It's strange. It's very strange, isn't it?
Perhaps there are different levels of awareness where some people might be able to notice while others don't quite get it. It's difficult to judge when people do things.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I don't think they do it in isolation. I think there are many social and cultural pressures.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of older people, I'm not going to call them old people, but older people, whatever age that starts at, and often it's a self-perception, but I think, a lot of us become invisible. And I think that's part of the problem.
Mm. Mm.
So, you know, the minute you step out of your cozy little circle,
Mm.
you may become an invisible person.
Mm.
And I think ageism is alive and well.
Mm.
So I think that could be part of it.
Mm. Mm.
So I think a lot of people behave like that in reaction to what they encounter.
Mm. Mm.
So I mean, if you're lucky enough to live in a monastery where there's a lot of old folk, and you know, older people are revered, you know, that's fine. But I think most people don't live in those sort of circumstances. Yeah, I think it is a big problem, ageism, but it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, this society and what advertising and things like that. When you see what it's doing, and if people are fragile, it is a huge social problem. And I don't live in a monastery. I go there to practice, but I don't live there. I have a wife. I have a grown child. I work at a university. I work in the real world, so I have to face that stuff too. Someone else, I think, had their... Yes?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, you're talking about coming to terms with our aging, our losses, and probably that's what makes younger people frightened in our society. But I suppose it's not only accepting the losses, it's accepting and seeing the real changes, because changes are not only losses. So in some ways,
Yes.
we're losing many things, and we go into pain and more pain, etc., and then decrepitude and then death. But that journey also brings with it many, many changes. And in a way, if that would broaden the mind, so to speak, it would be less frightening.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I would say in the point of Buddhist, not just Zen, but Buddhist meditation, I would say, is to realize the real nature of the self, what we really are. And when you do that, you no longer need to identify with the things that you usually identify with. So, for example, the senses closing down is not a frightening thing, because it's, of course, relatively speaking, it's a loss. I can't, looking at jars, and I can't read the small letters anymore. I used to have really good visual acuity reading the Chinese characters. I can't read. I need one of those magnifying glasses that my mother used to have. But I always forget where I put it, But yeah, I mean, these kinds of things. So yes, it's a loss. I can't read labels like I used to, but it's not just a loss. It's not just a loss. What remains? What remains? As long as we identify with, cling to some kind of identity, the suffering will come. The death will seem threatening. But it's only because we don't really know who we are. You follow? That's why I say, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a process of change.
Yes, it's a change, and nature, it's a strange way of saying nature knows what it's doing, but it's just as natural as a child growing up, this aging process. It's the way it should be, it's the way it is. And I have no regrets. Do you? It's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. I think you're a bit younger than me, but...
Jeff, I've seen fine people in last years become raving egomaniacs. People who are kind and truthful and brave become totally self-absorbed. And that does frighten me. I wondered if you have any wisdom about it.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of medical diagnosis there may be. Is Alzheimer's a result, or is it just something that their ego is unable to deal with death? I don't know. You follow? It could be something's wrong with them, and so they become that way. There's a physical illness, or it could be that the shell that they built is finally coming apart at the seams, and so they become like that. I would have to see the person. I don't know.
The dead.
Yeah, but I mean, you knew them. You knew them. Huh?
Yes.
What was your take? Were they ill, or were they?
A bit. Declining, deteriorating, a bit of mental deterioration, normal stuff.
Yeah.
They went from being a nice person to a nasty person.
Yeah.
That, I found it very sad.
I don't think you have to worry about that. My father got, it wasn't nasty, but it was tragic. I took my son to visit him the last time. He had Alzheimer's. And the last time I saw him, he was at a special home for he was in the army in the Second World War, so he was it was like a military special care center for Alzheimer's, a very good one in New Jersey. But the last time I visited him, he went into the bath, kind of shuffled into the toilet, and then came back out, and then would talk just for 30, and then he would shuffle back into the toilet, and then he would shuffle back out. And after about 4 or 5 times, the nurse kind of looked at me, and my son was about 8 years old at the time, so I figured we had seen enough. But that was the last time I saw him. But I also lived with Yamada Mumon Roshi, who was one of the great Zen masters of the 20th century. And I don't know if he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's or not, but he was definitely getting senile when I was with him. I lived with him for about a year. And it was interesting to see the kind of lightness there. He would forget things. But, he was being cared for very well also. He would forget things, but there was a lightness there, And when he was a Zen master, he could really be quite, an active Zen master. He could be quite powerful. But at this point in his life, it was just there was a lightness there that I had trouble seeing in my father. I would say that. But again, there are illnesses that people succumb to, but sometimes it's just the self not able to deal with, not able to hold on to the world that it had, and not able to let go of it either. And that's sad to see. That's sad to see. There are ways to illuminate that, not just Zen or Buddhism. There are many ways, but there are ways to see what we are really made of. What are you really made of? If you knew that, would you get like that at the end of your life? I don't think so.
I think there's another thing. Thank you very much for your talk, President. It's my experience with older people, as a doctor, that if they haven't lived a full life, loved enough, suffered enough, grieved enough, had enough excitement, victories, failures, when they get old, they get bitter and angry. It's totally unfulfilled, and it comes out, as all their kind of protective covers fall off. And so, the thing of living a full life, you live a full life, you can die a full death, it's also part of it. I think the great thing about practice and training, it teaches you how to live a full life. To experience all those things deeply and profoundly. And if we don't experience them deeply and profoundly, then we've missed, even if it's horrible, as you're saying about pain, even if it's a horrible experience, we don't allow ourselves to feel that we're cheating ourselves of life. And something about our culture doesn't encourage us to do that. It encourages us to avoid and to not really feel and experience deeply and profoundly. So it's sort of sad, but hopefully, this practice can help people. It can be a real help for people to live more deeply. Anyway, so it was a wonderful talk, Jeff. Thank you very, very much for coming.
think of, you know, feeling old and why don't we deal with it well? And there have been programs on TV which have inspired me a little bit to think about my attitude, because there are people in old people's homes that are now connecting with very young children from nursery. And those programs show me how what is left when you are kind of getting old, what is not lost, what remains, can be brought almost to life again and can be shared with little children. And I think that's so precious, because I think the focus, you know, going from what's happening in the world, you know, the focus of the world is what we lose, and we're so afraid to lose what we have that we forget to look at what, as you say, is left. And that program, I think, helps to actually look at what is left is also very, very precious and can have a value. I just wanted to share that.
So,
I think that has to be the last question.
yeah, okay. I just thought maybe the less you have, the easier it is to die.
Can I share something with you? Last year, I had the privilege of meeting a Soviet Army veteran in his 90s. He joined the Russian Army at the Battle of Stalingrad as a kid. He fought in that hell, and he fought all the way to Berlin and survived, and signed his name on the Reichstag wall of fall of Berlin. I asked him whether he was afraid of death. He said, "Don't be ridiculous. I live with it on a daily basis. I've been threatened with it and I've meted it out. To me, it is nothing."
Are we finishing on that one?
Nothing.
And a marvelous nothing it is.
Well, Jeffrey, can I thank you very, very much. This is your 4th time here. It's wonderful you've come, and I hope you can come again. Give us another talk.
I'd be honored.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all for your questions and comments.